The relief and disgust made way for shock. She barely recognized him. His trader attire was gone. In its place was a medical apron over a black body glove. His skin had the same translucent quality as the emaciated beings behind her, and it clung to his bones like wet parchment. Where his complexion once spoke of vigor, only dark grooves remained, as if he had been desiccated on a high-G planet. His movement was halted and unnatural. Only his voice betrayed his new appearance, still full of energy but with a timbre she could not place.
"Aish, it's good to see you,"
he said, brushing dirt from his apron.
"Although I can't say I'm surprised. Let me guess, Father sent you to find his treasured heir?"
She frowned as he spoke, her mind struggling to assimilate the scene in front of her.
"What happened to you?"
asked Janus in a whispered tone, tinged with disgust. She realized she'd been holding her pistol down at 45 degrees, unable to aim at her own flesh and blood, but similarly unable to holster it. Uncertainty gripped her. Jackor grinned.
"I found a new way, sister. A new way for us all."
"What does that even mean? What happened on Fronteras?"
Jackor paused and looked down momentarily while scratching his brow.
"If I'm quite honest, Aish, I can't quite recall. I arrived to warn Father of a new threat I'd uncovered, but I couldn't seem to get him to fully grasp the severity of the situation. He sent me to my quarters like a scorned child and sent some Medicaid personnel in after me, convinced I'd lost my sanity. I couldn't tell you what happened next, just that I woke to find said personnel collapsed on the floor next to me. As I gathered myself, two names kept swirling around my mind with pressing urgency. Some cult leader on a planet in the Tekrin sector, I forget where now. I knew I couldn't convince Father of the urgency of the matter, nor could I explain what happened to his staff, so I left."
Janus gritted her teeth.
"They died, Jackor."
He considered this for a moment, then shrugged.
"We move, sister. What's one life in exchange for trillions?"
"What are you talking about?"
she demanded, her disgust at his indifference clear in her tone.
"When we got to the cult stronghold, I was surprised to find my arrival had been expected. My flagship was hailed the moment we translated and coordinates sent for a parley. Some enormous brute with a pretentious name, I forget what now, was waiting for us, alone and unarmed. He proceeded to give me two things, instructions to find his counterpart here, and that dagger,"
he said, pointing at the ground. Janus glanced down at the curved, blood-smeared blade at her feet, the handle engraved with symbols that stung her eyes.
"He told me, however, that his counterpart would not be as welcoming. Taking heed of the brute's warning, I donned surf garbs and headed planetside once we arrived in Koltar, instructing my fleet to jump to a neighboring star and lay wait, so as not to be detected. I eventually infiltrated the local cult, making contact with the leader and gaining her trust, at which point I began to understand this whole scavenger hunt and my part in it."
Janus braced, preparing herself for what was to come. Her pistol had not moved from its middling position, hovering in the space between them.
"She told me of her plans to unite the once divided people of Koltar Primus, to pull them from their servitude and level the playing field, to allow them to move as one, an idea that appealed to me, until of course she told me how."
Janus waited while he absent-mindedly toyed with the hem of his apron.
"How, Jackor?"
He looked up.
"A simple ritual."
She grimaced.
"Heresy. Tell me you put an end to it."
"In a way, yes. She's right there,"
he said, gesturing at the table. Janus glanced at the mutilated body next to her and unconsciously moved away.
"But here's the thing, Ash. I didn't end her because she was a heretic. I ended her because her plan was feeble. The core concept brilliant, but the plan itself underwhelming to say the least."
Her eyes narrowed.
"Humanity's greatest enemy isn't corrupted Marines or Xenos or demons, or even the warp itself. It's fear. Fear of not having enough. Fear of being lost. Fear of being forgotten or irrelevant. And the thing is, we don't fear these things from the so-called enemies of humanity. No, we fear them from each other. Man's greatest threat is man himself, or more precisely, man's flaws. Our greed, envy, lust, wrath, and pride are what keep us apart, keep us fighting for scraps, keep greatness just out of our reach. But what if we could change that? What if we could remove these defects from the human condition?
Then we wouldn't be human, Jackal.
But wouldn't we? We've only ever viewed humanity through this single lens. But what if there was another way? What if we could not only evolve our perspective, but evolve human beings themselves?
Into what? What would you change us into?
She said, feeling her training push back against her biological impulse. She felt herself stumbling down a steep slope toward a now seemingly inevitable conclusion.
A single consciousness.
He stood with an expectant expression, waiting for her reaction. When it did not come, he continued.
Think about it, Aish. What if you felt the pain and joy of those around you? What if every slip and leap of your neighbor was experienced by you as if you were them, and vice versa? You would do everything in your power to protect them as if they were family, as if they were you yourself. Now take that planet-wide and suddenly you have a seamless, synchronous society, one entirely focused on a single goal, moving forward together. No more pain, no more suffering, no more war.
She was in free fall now. The slope was gone.
But that was the problem that I had with her ritual,
he said, nodding at the table.
It was just too small. Why limit ourselves to a single world? Can you imagine the same connection across the million worlds of the Imperium? We would be one, Aish. We would be gods.
At this, Janus's fall came to an abrupt and painful end. She had been holding out for a glimmer of hope that her brother was still present, that the situation was still salvageable, and that she could return to Lord Captain Janus with good news. But that glimmer had been rapidly fading under the weight of evidence to the contrary. She glanced at the rows of frozen beings, then turned back and kicked the dagger across the floor to Jackor. A brief murmur emitted from the contorted mouths behind her as their bodies momentarily jostled. Jackor watched the blade slide across the ground to his feet, then looked up. She nodded.
What do you need, brother?
She said with conviction. Jackor grinned, reached down and picked up the knife.
I knew I could count on you, Aish. Another offering, sister. This one is cold,
he said, looking at the body on the table.
From upstairs, quickly now. Our window is closing.
He moved back to the table and began talking to himself in a tongue she did not recognize.
Zern, Vok, Elven, Graf, Novan Veken Targen, Dai, Kandru, Vor, Elven, Sirten, Varul, Doriziden, Rodaval, Kar, Dran, Ruve, Rukandor, Zern, Vok, Elven, Graf, Novan Veken.
Jackor's muttering faded as she climbed the stairs. Reaching the top, she pushed her way through the mass of lost souls who moved apart like reeds in the wind. Her insides churned. Her mind was a roiling battle as loyalties clashed.
My brother, my dear brother, your eyes are still that of our childhood, but your words are poison. Why? Why must you stumble? You must have known this was a one-way trip. Your bloodline are dedicated servants of the God Emperor, of the Imperium. I know I must not falter. I have sworn an oath. I am an interrogator. I will be an inquisitor one day. Then why does my heart scream at me to run, to take him, to hide, to lie? Throne, forgive me. God Emperor, give me strength.
Stepping through the warehouse door, a wash of heated exhaust blew dust in her face, causing her to shield her eyes. As the gust subsided, she looked up, straight into the gaze of Lord Inquisitor Helvric Tar. Troops of her master's standing force, seconded guardsmen of the Astra Militarum, filed off the Tetrarch behind him, the heavy lander taking up the entire loading yard. Dranakir and Sister Emmeline stood to the right of the warehouse door behind her, their heads bowed.
My lord,
She said, taken aback.
Interrogator Janus.
Tar towered over her, the cloak pinned to his broad shoulders by his rosette billowing in the ship's exhaust. His expression was ice cold, his voice no warmer. Janus frowned.
how are you here, my lord?
She asked hesitantly.
I go where I am needed, Acolyte.
Replied the Inquisitor sharply. He looked down at his gauntlets and adjusted them as he continued.
The nature of your investigation concerns me, as does receiving a null pulse trigger from my right hand's Vox network. Please, put my concerns to rest.
At that moment, she knew there was no margin for error. She looked down and breathed deeply.
The heir to House Janus is dead. The cultists responsible for the situation you see here abducted him in an attempt to coerce Lord Captain Janus into opening his domain up to this same corruption. The cult has been neutralized. Jackal Janus took his own life defending his family's legacy.
Tar stared down at her, expressionless.
The alternative would have been far worse, Interrogator.
She paused for a moment as she looked up into the cold night sky. Not a single cloud impaired the view into the void as the light of a million worlds shone back at her.
What's one life in exchange for trillions, my lord?
She said quietly, then turned, slammed the warehouse door closed, and looked at Emmeline.
Burn it. Burn it all.